Mars. That's what astronaut, botanist, colonizer, space pirate Mark Watney says shortly into his unplanned staycation. For a guy who is facing death each and every second while stranded on Mars, Mark is someone who manages to keep his head on straight. For the most part.
He asked us to call him Captain Blondebeard.
The Martian has been criticized for not portraying a realistic example of a man stuck in isolation on an unfamiliar planet. I completely disagree with this sentiment, only because when you realize the type of man that Mark Watney is, the way this film plays out makes complete sense. Sure, the decision to show very little mental hardship for Mark might be to make it more marketable, but I think that the character that we are left with after the fact is one of the most intriguing in recent history. And thank God, because we have to spend the whole movie with him. Let's break apart the first Zoom movie in space, and figure out how this man is the perfect candidate to be stranded on Mars. The first glaring explanation of Mark's constantly positive philosophy is delusional confidence. Something I know a lot about with this YouTube grind. Watney is constantly using bold self-belief to keep him sane. Even in his first log entry, he makes it clear that he is not going to die here. A statement that most people might wait until they get the hole out of their stomach to say. The confidence in himself is the #1 component in getting home. If Mark lets the self-doubt in, he surely will crumble. This is where the constant cameras on him actually play to his advantage. As Mark is going soul to soul, he is never alone when he has something to perform for. The self-belief is fueled as he goes on because he knows someone after him will see his impact. The constant dialogue talking to future Martians keeps Mark focused, out of his head, and thinking about more than just will I die or won't I. Even when the odds are stacked against him, Mark rarely shows any bit of uncertainty. He knows everything he needs is in his brain, and he's sure that he's paving the way for the future. I think his confidence is supplemented with humor for a different reason. The humor can come off as delusion, but is really a distraction Mark uses to help himself stay positive. Things like the disco music mocking or calling himself a space pirate. These really are just coping mechanisms to shift his brain to something different than the immediate death, which is normally a thin layer away. We get the second level of Mark's philosophy when things get so tough to handle that even humor can't distract him. Mark Watney refuses to blame anyone but himself. No matter what happens, whether it's the crew leaving him behind or any type of explosion, Mark will never put his problems outside his reach. This will spill into our third level, but to stay on topic, Watney has to put everything on himself, or else the odds will feel insurmountable. He needs to always feel in control. If Mark decides to blame NASA or the crew for anything that happens to him, he immediately surrenders to the situation, something that you can't do when it's life or death. When Watney is adamant to NASA that it's not his crew's fault for leaving him behind, it might be him being a nice guy from their perspective, but we know, because we're with him all the time, he really never shifts blame. He always chooses accountability over resentment, where he would surely waste much needed energy. At times, Mark might take this help yourself mentality a little close to selfishness, like when he talks to fellow botanists or gets a chance at his own plan. But the move to never put anything outside yourself is what keeps him proactive and constantly sure that he can solve the next problem. Oh, I just said the third level. The third and biggest aspect of Mark's philosophy is best summed up by his speech at the college.
At some point, everything's going to go south on you. Everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. You do the math. You solve one problem, then you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
As you can see, Mark breaks down any seemingly impossible need into manageable steps. His willingness to continue solving the next problem is something that every astronaut would need. When you're in space, you cannot fall into a panic. Otherwise, you're that much closer to death. You simply have to follow the correct protocol, and if there is none, make up your own. We see Watney do this countless times with his potato farming, heating the rover, or even repairing home base when it blew up. The only moments of stress we see from Mark are, of course, when he's not actively solving something. When his back is against the wall, his first move is to start another task, even if that task is purely to distract himself, like when he's hoping his plastic seal holds. Mark's willingness to solve the next problem puts his brain in a state of confidence, knowing that no matter what, there is something he can do. Even if that means the stupidest shit, like flying around space Iron Man style. The Martian has some great lessons on how to live your life when facing odds that feel too large to overcome. The character of Mark Watney is a model astronaut, although I don't believe he's a model human being. The problems with Mark's philosophy, or psychology is what I probably should have called it, start coming up once he gets home. Maybe he was the perfect specimen to conquer Mars, but although we don't see it, he's surely not the perfect specimen to conquer everyday life. Delusional confidence can be a great way to achieve more than most, but at a point, your delusion becomes ignorance of your current circumstance. Sometimes you have to face the facts. Trying to lie yourself out of it only creates more problems. Blaming no one but yourself is perfect to never feel out of control, but what happens when there's things that you can't put your hands on? At a point, you have to let go of the part you play and give yourself up to the unknown. Otherwise, you're fighting against the current of life. Always solving the next problem is a great thing to have in a life or death scenario, but when you're on Earth, there are problems that aren't always solvable. At least in space, if you don't solve it, you're dead. At home, the unsolvable problems are what you have to live with. This could drive you crazy if you're always trying to figure them out. Not to mention, always looking for the next problem creates more of them. You have to be content with some of the problems present, otherwise you'll spend your whole life solving them. So, Mark's philosophy isn't quite something we should all adopt. His brain is perfectly geared for what we witness in The Martian, but not for the life of a professor, like we see he is at the end. Mark's future might have further hardship, but at least he gets to deal with those not in complete isolation on a distant planet. Speaking of which, I am in complete isolation right now, talking to a camera, taking a page from Watney's book, you could say. So, now that I'm slightly depressed, thinking about how I talk into potential nothingness on the daily, I'll instead feel grateful for you watching and end the video here. Oh yeah, one more thing. Fuck Mars. And with that, thank you, Abby. Specifically you, Abby. And of course, to everyone else who watched this one, thank you. Yeah, I had an absolute blast making this video, honestly. I love getting to break apart the psychology of characters. Although I don't really know what I'm doing. It's not like I have a degree in this stuff. It's just, I feel like there's standout, gimmies that even somebody as dumb as me can talk about. If you haven't seen The Martian, I would really suggest you go watch it, even though I just spoiled a lot. It is so much better than I remember. I mean, I liked it initially, but it blew me away when I most recently watched it. I mean, it's edge of your seat every single second, and some of the most, hoorah moments ever. It is fantastic. Unfortunately, it got 0 Oscars, though, because it was going up against, the same movie on planet Earth, The Revenant, with Leonardo DiCaprio. So, that's the only unfortunate part. But, yeah, I think we're done here. So, deuces.